Alright, so let's try something in the second house. And so we have the north node in the second house, and we also have the south node in the eighth house. And so what we know about these energies is that there's an integration that's happening within us. And so when we're dealing with the second house, we have to deal with the early structures of one's life in which we feel, or we were supposed to feel, safe. And safe is kind of not a good enough word. It's like safe for the inner animal, this deepest form of being a human, which take all the Maslow's hierarchy off, where we are looking for purpose and etc. It's more like, how do we feel deeply safe, physically safe? And I imagine a lot of that is formed in our relationship with our early family and life. And so we can't always assume that the second house is an easy house, but when we have the north node here, we're dealing with these types of issues. And so then the south node is in the eighth house, and which is dealing with the other element of this, which is other people's values, other people's security, the joint and shared value that we create together, what's underpinning it is this sense of truth, that we are on the pursuit of the truth, and so that we can get to know each other at a deeper level, so we can merge. So Taurus is about the individual, and this eighth house is about the merging of power with others, and the merging of power, like on every level, emotionally, sexually, financially. And then of course that reflects back in the second house. You could say the same. It's like my own values, my own sense of financial security, my own sense of identity. And values is always a big thing for Taurus. What do I value? Who am I? What am I going to bring forward in the world? And so the eighth house is a house that I really deeply resonate with, and it's a lifelong journey to understand something that's not really definable, which is which is kind of, Liz Green is one of my favorites, and she kind of talks about the eighth house and how we're limited in our view of sexuality. And so that some of this hasn't been dug up yet, but so I imagine that someone with the south node in the eighth house is an expert at seeing the values of other people and seeing the inner resources of others, and also understanding how they need to represent themselves in order to merge with other people and bring those values into their own life, the joint values of what that relationship represents. And so, but for whatever reason in this time, getting involved in others, whether there's a vague sense of inadequacy when you get there, or maybe there's this idea that you're not interested in maintaining that at that level anymore, because there's this sense of, this sense of closeness requires a lot of effort, and there might be this sense that you already have done this before, and this effort that you're putting in to be involved in others, this merged value system between you and somebody else feels vaguely dissatisfying. And so I imagine early in life, this is probably expressed, maybe that's an early marriage, or their marriage, comes to this place of depth and intensity, and and we merge emotionally and sexually, and that feels easy, but it's not the place that you're meant to stay. And so these and some of these things might physically manifest in that even in your family, maybe you've been born into a wealthy family and the resources of your family has been available to you early in your life, but something drives you back in order to establish your own path and your own values and your own sense of deep inner security for who you identify yourself to be. And it could be for whatever reason. Maybe it's just that you get your family basically cuts you off, or you're in a marriage that where you merged and something happens, or you're in this deeper relationship, something happens to disrupt it, which of course is 8th house, the disruption, the chaos, the death, the deep transformation that happens in a marriage. Something happens, your spouse dies, whatever, you get driven back into your own world and your own resources, which you probably hadn't spent a lot of time defining. And so either way, we can describe this hundreds of different ways, and there's so many different things. Taurus being the builder of the new, the builder of something from its initial stages forward, like the idea that it's brand new. And then the idea of Scorpio meaning reforming something that exists. And so it's kind of like you're pushed back into the new. You're pushed back into seeing who you are at the fundamental security driven level, and what you're asked to do is to define who you are. And so regardless of how the situation gets you here, what matters is that we define our own selves and our own values and what we stand for and what means something to us, who we are physically, what we're in our body, in our taking care of our own bodies, things like that, instead of abandoning them to this shared value or merging in this deep sense in this relationship and losing yourself in those values of the relationship. You're coming back into your own, and so it's not that we won't have these deep relationships, but it won't come properly until after we define ourselves, and that definition maybe hadn't existed early on in life, or maybe it's revisiting what you already know about yourself and declaring it. And it's almost like your relationships have to accept who you are and your values before they are going to be fruitful. So it's like not losing yourself or your values or sacrificing them to gain something through a partnership or merging of your power with others to create something. So that identity needs to be maintained. And so that's essentially this axis, and hopefully you found something good in that.